Hi and welcome to PolyOriginals with Fiona Abel-Smith. So for today's project I thought we'd have a bit of fun and have a go at making some tassels and then covering them with polymer clay. This is probably one of the first techniques I started to do when I did polymer clay. Somebody had shown me a long time ago how to make tassels and cover them in beads, and I just decided we'd have a go and cover them in polymer clay. And I did a tutorial on it probably about more than 10 years ago now, which was just locally, but people seem to enjoy it. I've made them for Christmas decorations, for jewellery, home furnishings, all sorts, and there's no end really to how you can decorate your tassels with polymer clay. But for today's project I thought I'd show you first how to make the tassel and then how to cover it in polymer clay. So I needed to come up with a cane. So this is a very simple cane, nothing that dissimilar from things I've done in the past, so it should be fairly easy for most of you who followed my tutorials beforehand. But of course, if you've got your own canes, use your own canes. I've only done this cane just as a sample to use for this tutorial. It doesn't take too long to do, it's quite a simple technique, and we'll start by going through the equipment you need for today's project. So to start with, I'll go through what we need to create the tassel. Now the first thing you're going to need are some embroidery threads. Now these are the polyester rayon threads that are used in embroidery. They're easily obtainable. Buy them in most sewing shops or online. You can get the variegated colours, but I like to use 3 different colours when I'm making my tassels because it just adds a little something, I think. Although if you only want to buy one colour, then I would suggest getting one of the variegated colour threads because it just gives you something additional interest in the actual tassel. So 3 spools of this is 500 metres per spool. This will last for several tassels. We need something to hold the threads whilst we're winding them, so some form of plastic or paper bag, material bag, just something that you can pop the threads in and put them on the floor at your feet whilst you're making your tassel. Then we need some form of frame to size and make our tassel on. Now I'm going to use today this embroidery frame. This one is 4 inches 10 centimetres across this way, and this is the direction I'm going to use. But it's also one that's just under 6 inches, so 15 centimetres across this way as well. So I'm going to make one that's big enough to use for a pendant. If I was using it this way, it's big enough to make a big tassel to use for home decor, furnishings, that sort of thing. And these ones, I like to use these frames just because you go round and round and round it, and then gives you easy cutting in between the 2 layers as you go, just to make life easy. To make the earrings, I'm actually going to use a ruler, and I'm going to thread round the ruler. So basically use whatever you have to hand at home just to make your tassel. This one obviously is a lot harder to cut through because the thread's going to be lying right next to the form. So because of that, if you've got something like that, you're going to need quite a fine pair of scissors to be able to get through and snip all the threads. If you're using something larger than just an ordinary pair of craft scissors should do. You're going to need a sheet of paper, just ordinary paper. A4 sheet is plenty big enough, you won't use the whole thing. And to mark the paper, we're going to use a pen. Just a little bit of tape. This is just ordinary masking tape, sellotape, sticky tape, anything will do, just to hold the paper in place when we're making our tassels. And you'll need some form of embroidery cotton. I'm just gone for green here because it's going to match with the colours of thread that I'm using. And we're going to use that to bind up the tassel. Once we've made our tassel, we can start decorating it with polymer clay. And just to do the base level of polymer clay, you're going to need a little bit of scrap clay. This is way too much, but it's easier to use a larger piece than a smaller piece just to work on. Certainly about 14 grams, quarter of an ounce would be absolutely fine for that. You'll need a polymer clay blade. I often refer to these as tissue blades because that's what they're known as in the UK. Some form of roller. This sort of size is perfect, but you can use a larger one or smaller, whatever you've got to hand. A craft knife, a knitting needle. This one happens to be 4mm. It doesn't have to be just a medium-sized knitting needle. Going to need just a little piece of card. I've just corrugated that slightly because that's what we're going to rest the tassel on when we bake it. Cut yourself from your A4 sheet of paper just a very thin sheet because we're going to use this to measure around the tassel to know what size we want the clay to go. Either some liquid clay, which I've decanted here into a little pot for ease of use, or some PVA glue will work perfectly well, so one of those two for covering the tassel in the clay. And then depending what you want to do with your tassel, if you want to do its home furnishings, then just leave the cotton thread on it and we can tie some ribbon on afterwards. If you want to do a pendant or earrings or something like that, you will need some jump rings, your choice of colour. And if you're using jump rings, then obviously some pliers, a couple of pliers just to help open and close the rings. If you're going to sand and polish your tassels once they're baked, then a little bit of cling film or plastic wrap works really well. And as always, when we're measuring things out, I use this laminated sheet of graph paper. The graph paper I have freely downloaded from www.printablepaper.net, and this is the 4 squares per inch one, and I've just laminated it to make it easy to use. If you prefer working centimetres, then get yourself a centimetre one. Other than that, we will need the normal pasta machine, wet wipes or wet tissues just to wipe over any mess we make as we go along, and then we'll move on to the clay. For today's project I'm using Fimo Soft, but all known brands of polymer clay will work well for this project, and because I'm only making a very small tassel, I'm only going to use a small amount of clay. If you like the cane we make, then obviously you can quite happily use double the amount of clay, and that will give you much more to do a big project with. I am using the colours gold, forest green, Windsor blue, cherry red and 2 separate lots of white, and we're going to use these on 2 different parts of the cane, so I keep them separate and I will condition them separately. And for the amounts, we've got 1/4 ounce of all of these, and that's 14 grams, and then 1/8 of an ounce or 7 grams of the red. And all we need to do is condition all of that clay thoroughly. If you're unsure on how to condition clay, I do have a video giving you some tips and techniques on how to do that. And once you've conditioned it, put it on a medium to thin setting of your pasta machine. So I'm using setting number 5 on my machine, where 0 is thick and 9 is thin. So I've got my embroidery frame, I've got my 3 colours which I've chosen to do with my threads. I've got them open so that I've got all 3 ends together. And I've got my plastic bag. So holding on to these 3 ends, I'm going to pop the embroidery threads into my bag and then put the bag on the floor below me. Because now, as I go round and round and round the frame, so they will pull out in a nice even fashion. So I'm not worried about the starting point. All I need to do is to have those 3 cottons there, and I'm going to go around and I'm going to keep doing that, going round and round and round until I've gone round 300 times, trying to keep it as central as I possibly can. Once you've done that 300 times, get yourself your length of embroidery cotton, thread it through the middle and bring it up, and we're going to tie halfway. Now I haven't cut off my threads yet. Tie it halfway. If you've got a friend who can put a finger on it, brilliant. If you haven't, do the best you can to tie a tight knot at this stage, but don't worry overly. And having got that through, put him round this last one time, and we're going to cut right through the middle of these pieces here. Only the one side, so make sure your scissors have gone only halfway through, and cut as evenly as you can down the middle. You can now open them out. If you want to, check how tight your knot was, because you can always tie another knot at this stage now that all the threads have been loosened. And you can quite often do a tighter knot now. So go back and do a tighter knot. And then pull all the pieces down so they're nicely together like that. If you've got any particularly long ends, just trim them off, but we're not trimming at all rest now. We'll trim all the main bits later on. And what you need to do now is to get that sheet of paper. And you want to decide how far down you want your polymer pattern to go. So I want it to go probably about there. So therefore I need paper that's going to wrap all the way around the rest of my tassel. So I'm going to chop a piece off nice and straight about here. Get yourself a piece of tape handy. And now you are going to roll the paper around your tassel as tight as you can get it. So start just below where you've tied your end on. And I say get it as tight as you possibly can, but you also want to make sure it's even, because we're going to use this top edge to measure where our polymer is going. So try and make sure you're wrapping it nice and even down this side. You don't need the whole sheet, so I'm going to chop off about there and then tape down so you've got a nice paper sheath round your tassel. We are then going to pull that down to where you want your pattern to be and how much of your pattern you want. Once you've done that, we need to wrap this tightly with more of this cotton before we can cover it with polymer clay. So pulling yourself out a nice bit, we are going to start. Now you want to hold the loose end on your thumb there, pull this piece right up and over and above where your top piece is going to be to create yourself a loop at this end. Where this piece now comes back down here, we are now going to start binding very, very tightly. So always keep these bits out of the way, keep the loop nice and at the top, and pull this as tight as you can. The first couple of rounds are a little tricky, but once you get going, it gets easier to do. So all I'm doing is I'm just working my way up the top of the tassel. When you've got as far as you can get, and I say it's really nice and taut, cut off the end of the piece you're wrapping around. I'm just going to hold that piece where we tied the knot at the top off to one side so it's not complicating matters. Where that loop is, you want to cut off this top end and put your end through the loop, because what will happen now is when you go back to that piece you had right at the beginning and pull, that will pull the loop down and it will pull the thread that's wrapping that last one round down as well. So when the loop starts to disappear, it's now going to start pulling that thread under the rest of your tightly bound piece. Once it's gone slightly down, and you can normally see a little lump where it's gone, then you can chop off that end, and now chop off this end, and you now have a tightly bound tassel. Obviously if you're just doing a tassel, that's all you need to do, but we're going to cover ours with polymer clay. So what we're going to do a scrap layer first, and then we're going to do a patterned layer. So we're just going to do the scrap layer first to give us a nice surface to work on and go all the way up to the top here, and then once we've got our scrap clay on, then we can start to put our pattern layer on. And the reason we had this nice and straight is we're going to use this as the level when we put our polymer clay around. And the next thing I need to do is to decide what I want to do with the top of this. Now at the moment obviously you've got a piece of cotton coming out of the top. If you want to use it in home furnishings, then this might be sufficient, or you can thread a piece of ribbon through here so it goes underneath and bring that out instead. Because I'm going to use this as a necklace, I want a jump ring to go in here. So get yourself a jump ring. Make sure it's big enough that it can fit inside have clay inside it and will still show enough to put another hoop or jump ring or cord over the top. Once it's opened out, you just need to put it under the cotton for now. A couple of threads as well if you can get them, but nice and central, and then close it back up. And then twist it round so that the join is at the bottom. I can now chop off this cotton. I haven't done it right at the top because I can hide that under the polymer clay. And I will now have that jump ring being at the top of my piece. The next thing I want to do is to help the polymer clay stick to this. So either with some liquid clay or PVA glue would work just as well for this particular bit we're going to do now. I'm going to give myself a generous layer because it will soak into the cotton quite a bit, because I want the polymer clay to be able to stick nice and easily to all of these threads. So going down to the bottom, as you can see, just spreading it around. Try not to get it on the silks at the bottom because that will just make them hard when this bakes. And with this I can then brush down those cotton ends at the very top that are just snipped off. Take your scrap clay and put it through a medium thinnish setting. So I've used setting number 4 on my pasta machine, and you want a piece that's big enough that it's going to fit round the top of the tassel. Once your tassel's been coated in the liquid polymer clay or PVA glue, then we are going to sit him on the scrap clay. Scrap clay can go right up to the top, but we don't want too much because we probably need to chop some off. And then I'm going to mark roughly where the bottom is. Cut myself off a piece. Beaten off the end, you don't want too much because it becomes unwieldy. And then lifting it up, start to put it down on the tassel top. Now the clay does have a natural inclination to pull away from the cotton that we've wrapped round. So persuade it gently that that is where it wants to go. So I'm just going to join up the seam by rolling the knitting needle across. I've made sure it's nice and neat at the bottom. To be honest, I don't want to do an awful lot more to that because the more you play with it, the more it will come away from the cotton. But we're just going to then roll up this top to again persuade the clay that it does want to go all the way up to the top. Of course, once it reaches itself and starts to join one side to the other, it becomes much easier to fit. It's only the cotton that it doesn't like to stick to. Try and make sure that any jump ring, ribbon or cotton you've got at the top is still nice and central, and also that you've got a nice gap in it so you can fit both our patterned bit of clay that's going on next and any other finding you want to put through, or ribbon or cord, when the piece is finished. Spend a bit of time just finessing and when you're happy with the top and where your piece is centred, you can always just roll it on the tile to make sure that all these sides are nice and smooth and even. Have a look at the bottom. We want this to be as neat as possible. If it's come completely out of shape, you can, with the sharp edge of your blade, just chop a fraction off. If it's just slightly out with the blunt side, you can just pull it up slightly. But basically we want a nice smooth flat bottom and a nice smooth top where you can clearly see through any finding or ribbon, and it's nicely placed at the top. Once that is done, take your piece of corrugated card, so that will just sit nicely in whilst it bakes. I'm just going to trim those couple of bits off, don't need to, but just to keep them out of the way. And then, as always when I'm baking, I will wrap the whole thing in some foil just to make sure that this protects all of this whilst it is baking. the clay bakes at a nice low temperature, so it won't bother these silks whatsoever, and then bake as per your manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. And in the meantime, let's get started on making the cane. So I've conditioned all my clay in the amounts that I'd cut them up into. So we've got the gold, one of the pieces of the white and the green, and we're going to do a skinner blend between these three colours. I'm going to make it very simple for today. We're cutting diagonally through the two end ones, and then we'll turn one piece up that way, that piece up that way. These two go on top, then they lie across the middle. For anyone unsure how to do a skinner blend, I do have a video tutorial showing you how to do those with some tips and techniques, and I'll put the link to that in the video details below. Once you've got that, I've just folded it up so that it makes it easier for the clay all to stick together, and I'm going to put it through fold first in my pasta machine. Now these were all conditioned on a thin setting, so setting number 5. So because I've now got 4 layers, I'm going to put this up to setting number 3 on my machine, and I'm going to continue putting it through, fold first, collecting it, folding bottom to top, until I have a nice smooth blend, and I'll bring you back when I've got to that stage. So once we have our nice smooth blend, I'm going to chop it into 3. I'm going to chop it into slices. The size or the amount of slices you have depends on how thick you want your cane to be. I like to go about 1.5 inches, about sort of 3.5 centimetres across that way, as being the height. I'm then going to just pinch in one end and put it back through the pasta machine on the same level that I'm working on, so number 3 at the moment. And now I have my longer piece. I'm going to put it back through, gold end first, that way through, on setting number 9, which is my thinnest usable setting. So work down the settings on your machine if necessary, or go to your thinnest usable one if you can go straight to that one. So there we have our nice long thin ribbon of clay, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to concertina this, starting at one end and going backwards and forwards, and doing it probably about 1/2 to 3/4 inch, so about 1.5 to 2 centimetres across. And as you do it, try to make sure you don't have too much air trapped in the folds. Obviously you can spend a lot longer doing it at home. I'm just doing it quickly so you get the idea. If your clay ever breaks when you're doing this concertinaing, don't worry about it, just patch it back together. Okay, it's all slightly uneven, so just press it down, because we're not worried about what the ends are going to look like. It's about what's in the middle that counts. What we're now going to do is to cover this in a layer of the dark blue. And this time I've put it through on setting number 3 of the pasta machine, just to give us a nicer, wider outline. So with your tissue blade, cut off top and bottom and one end, and then just wrap this neatly around. When it comes to the top, cut off the excess, so you've just got one nice layer around. And now you need to decide which end of your cane, be it the gold end or the green end, you want to put your added detail into. I'm going to put it into the gold end, so I'm going to set it so the gold end is uppermost to me. And with a little rolling pin, I'm just going to create a groove inside. I'm going to take some of my white clay. Again, this was the second piece of white clay that was also on setting number 5. Use the polymer clay blade to cut yourself a piece that will then fit in to that groove. You can curl it slightly so that it fits in to start with. Then use your roller to push it in. If you want to, you can trim off the excess. Completely up to you. I'm not worried about it overlapping at the ends, because the ends will become distorted, and it's better to have too much here than too little, because you want to make as much of your pattern as you can. Then I'm going to take our piece of red, and that should just be the right size to pop in to our piece, and then gather together your leftovers of the blue, because we want to make same amount, so going through and setting number 3 again, and we're going to cover over that top top bit with a layer of blue, so the whole thing is encased in blue. It doesn't need much, so I'm going to shove that on the top, cut off a little excess piece. So now we have our pattern added on the inside, and what we're now going to do is we're going to change the shape of that slightly, and in order to help us do that I'm going to take a knitting needle and just press down into that, because by pressing down that automatically means that that will fold uppermost. So when that folds uppermost, it then becomes easier to press that into a square shape, and by square I mean across this face here. Once you have a piece that's square, you can start working down the sides. And once you've got it over 2 inches in length, we're going to cut it into 2 even pieces. So place it so that you've got an even place on your cutting measuring sheet, and then chop it down. We are then going to take these 2 pieces and then we are going to force them together. And doing it this way just changes how things work and just gives more of a swirl that you wouldn't have had if you'd had done this any other way. And our next thing we need to decide is we're going to now make this into a triangular shape. So do you want this bit to be the point or this bit to be the point? Now I'm going to make this one be the point. So to do that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to put it down so that the red is flat on the tile and force those 2 bits down so that this bit stays as a triangle. You see there? So what I'm going to do now is elongate it again, because now I want to get it so that I can take 2 even pieces again. So all I'm doing with my fingers is just pulling it longer, nice and evenly along the length. Now I know I've got quite a lot of wastage here, you can see that, so I'm just going to chop off a little bit of that so that when I now chop it into 2 pieces I can be more assured that I've got most of the pattern on the inside. So once again, chop it into 2 pieces and we're going to put it together so that those 2 pieces of green pieces stick together. Check the other end to make sure it aligns nicely. And this time we're going to do exactly the same because we want this green bit to be the point again, but this time we want this green bit to be a nice right angle, so we're not having to go down quite so much. So I'd recommend to start with, press down, you'll find that the 2 bits open up, that's fine, press those together. And now we can actually lay it on its side. So if you put one side flat on the tile and then manipulate this bit so it's upright, then put that side down and manipulate this piece so it's upright, you end up with a right angled triangle. You see there where this green bit's forming a bit of a right angle, and we want to do this just so that it's long enough to take 2 pieces, because of course when we put 2 right angled triangles together they will form a square, and that will form the basis of our pattern for what we're doing today. So again, I'm working till it's about 2 inches, 5 centimetres in length, so that when I chop down the middle I can ignore the wastage on either end, and that should give me a nice square pattern. Put those 2 bits together, check how the bottom's measuring up, and there we have our square. I'm just going to press it together to make sure it is nice and square. And now I need to check and see what size I need this to go. Take your piece that's nicely cooled from the oven and get yourself a very thin strip of ordinary A4 paper. And with your paper, measure around the circumference of your tassel. So that's about there. Then see what size you've got. So I now know that the circumference of my tassel is under 2 inches round the outside. So if I want 4 slices of this cane, I need each slice or each side to be 1, 2, 3, 4, just less than ½ an inch. So now I know how much I need to reduce this cane down by. So I will now do that. I will reduce this down until it's just under 1/2 inch across all of these sides. Having got it more or less down to the size I want, I don't need a lot to do the tassel, so I'm just going to take off a small piece, put that one to one side, and just work on finessing this one piece. So as with all canes, when we're going to veneer, I want to make sure my points are really nice and sharp, so that when we put them together, the points meet up nicely. I want to make sure that my sides are nice and flat, so I'll give them a roll. And now I've still got a little way to go to make it just under that 1/2 inch, but I'm very nearly there. I can always re-roll when I get close. And then when I'm about ready, I'm just going to chop off one slice from the end to give myself a nice, neat starting point. Take your covered tassel, a little bit of the liquid clay, or again, PVA glue would work fine just for this little bit, and just give yourself a light covering, not too much, just enough to make it tacky, not slippy, all over. And then start by taking 4 slices, and as always it's more important for them to be consistent than it is for them to be thick or thin, so choose a thickness of slice that's suitable and comfortable for yourself. As per normal, we want to look for a tell with something slightly different or off, and I've already spotted on this one there's a little bit here that is slightly out of kilter with all the rest, so that's the one I'm going to use as a tell, so then I can start to put my pieces together. So that one would have laid on top like that, so I now know he's going to fold over like that. So I'll put those two together, and then I'm just going to lay them right at the base of my tassel. Same with these two. Find the same tell and put those two together. And then fit them in so that they fit nicely next to each other again at the bottom of the tassel. So those are your first 4 slices laid on, so repeat again for the next 4, and then we're going to add those on, and then we'll have another 4 to go on the top. And don't forget to spot where the tell is on your one there. Put that piece so it would be the same place. Then you know you can flip that one like that, and then repeat with the next piece. Pull or lift any ones up to make sure you get your nice fit as you go around, and then complete for the top layer, but don't press this top layer, don't press them down right at the top at this stage. Just leave them, you can stick them down the bottom, but leave the top bits free just for a moment, because we might have to do a bit of manipulating to get them to fit around the top. So when you've got your bottom piece on and you've matched it up, so you've attached the bottom bit but not the top, just press just the top of it. Do it if you want to, just with a knitting needle, just the very top of it. Then we need to take account for this circumference changing at the top here. So with your craft knife, you want to follow this line and just cut straight up. And what you'll find is you should shave a tiny bit off. And depending on how round your curve is, that depends on how much you're going to chop off. Again, up. That one looks as though it's pretty straight at the moment, so let's put another one on and see how we go. So exactly the same again. I've just put the bottom on. It's not too bad at the top of that one, so leave that one going, but that one is going over. So again, I'm just going to push him back to make sure he's flat at that stage, and with my craft knife just let it roll up to take off the excess. Add the next piece. And again, you can see where that one overlapped, so don't stick it down, just let it fall slightly. Roll up with your knife, take off the excess, and those two pieces should then sit nicely next to each other. Again, those two were slightly straight on mine, so they can sit together. This one is the one that needs a bit taken off. Now, as you can see, we're pretty close up to the top here. Now I know I don't actually need to add any extra clay on there, because what we're going to do now is we're going to start rolling over all these joins to get them nicely sealed. Now obviously keep hold of the paper. So at the moment I'm only going up to about here, I'm not going right over the top. Once you've got all this side nicely smooth, so the seams are pretty closed, now you can very gently start to roll the clay up and over the top. Now, if you'd got a lot of space here, then you could actually do the same as we did with this last row, add some more on top and then take off or cut away any of the excess. But because we only had a little bit on this one, I know I can very gently roll this up until it joins over at the top. Remember to roll it under the jump ring or around any ribbon or cord that you've got in place. Once the top is nice and smooth and finished, make sure you've got a nice clean surface, nice clean fingers, and you can very gently just roll over. To smooth off any bumps or nicks or crevices. Check the bottom, so it should be nice and neat as before. If you want to, just use the side of your blade to push up any clay. And when you're happy, get your corrugated sheet again, and as before, wrap the whole thing in foil and bake according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay you are using. And I will bring you back just to finish off how to cut the end of the tassel off when we're done and it's all finished baking. Once your piece has finished baking, then you need to decide what finish, if any, you want to put on it. If you've got it nice and smooth anyway, you can literally leave it as is. I'm, however, going to sand and polish mine, and to do that, I'm going to use the wet, dry sandpaper, and I'm going to use 240 grit, 600, 1000, 1500, and then 2000. Now I need to do that in a little bit of water, and I'll put a little bit of detergent soap in the water, but I need to protect, or I want to protect the silks and make sure I don't do too much damage to those. So I'm going to leave the paper in situ, and I'm going to take some cling film or plastic wrap and I'm going to put that all the way around the bottom, keeping it away from the polymer clay bit, so that when I sand I can hold nicely onto this bit and just sand that. I also need to be quite careful to make sure I don't sand off any of the ring at the top that I'm going to keep to put another jump ring in to make it into a pendant. If you don't want to sand and polish, as I say, you can leave it as it is, or you could simply varnish and use one of the varnishes that's suitable for using with polymer clay, and most of the brands have their own make, so the choice is up to you. So I'll just get that sanded and polished and bring you back when I've done that. And of course I can never resist putting all the pieces together so you see what our kaleidoscoped veneer will look like. So this is how it will look like if you don't want to do it as a tassel and just have it as a square sheet. And all I've done is just cut all the individual squares and put them together on a piece of scrap clay. So obviously you can use that for loads of other things as well, and you'll have a lot left over rather than just doing your individual tassels. Just a couple of safety issues when you're doing your sanding and polishing, if that's what you want to do. When I'm sanding, I always wear a pair of rubber gloves, so if you're able to, wear something like that, or certainly protect your hands. Sandpaper cuts, or even if you actually start to sand your hands by mistake and don't realise till you're finished, they're painful. I've done that. You don't want to do that if you can avoid it. And when polishing, normally I polish on a bench grinder with an unstitched polishing mop, but today, because they're small bits, I'm going to use just a handheld machine on its lowest setting, so don't go overly fast. And again, this is an unstitched cotton mop attachment, and that gives you a really nice shine. And when I'm polishing, again, I will always wear some form of dust mask to protect myself from any bits flying off, and safety goggles. Okay, so here is our piece that's been sanded and polished. As you can see, it's got a nice shine on, and the cling film protected virtually all of the silks whilst I was sanding it, and it's just pulled away slightly whilst I was doing the polishing, just to give me access down to the bottom. So now we've got that, I'm going to pull that off completely, and I'm going to put that one side to make sure it's going to dry, to make sure I've got no wetness on these threads at all. And then I'm going to need another piece of paper because I'm going to re-wrap, ready for cutting and trimming our tassel. So when your tassel is dry, put it on a piece of paper that's wide enough to go all the way around, as per normal. Get yourself a piece of tape to hand. You're also going to need your scissors, and what we're going to do is we're going to work out a length that we're happy for this tassel to be. So I'm thinking, so look at it, a proportion, it's going to be for a pendant, proportion to the top bit, probably about there. So I'm just going to mark that, and then I'm going to cut this piece as straight as I can. Obviously you can use a ruler. And now I'm going to turn it the other way up, because I know this is the absolute straight side. And then, as we've done before, wrap it as tight as you possibly can around those threads, close up to the end. Get your piece of tape, stick that round. And what you're looking for, what you should hopefully have, is that this piece is nice and flat and straight and nicely even with the bottom of your piece. And then it's very simple. I've squashed this bit flat, and with the scissors I'm going to work from one side, turn over and do the other side, and you're just going to use that piece of paper as a guide. The moment of truth. Pull off the paper, shake it out, and there is your finished tassel. It's got a nice splay and it's looking good. However, you will probably notice, like me, that there are a couple of bits on the inside that were curled up or twisted that if you stretch them out will be slightly longer. And this is a good tip, both for getting rid of those bits and also for if when you've stored your tassel it comes out all crumpled or the threads are all twisted. If you get yourself a nice long knitting needle or something else, a pair of tongs or something that can hold this, but I'm looking for a needle that will just slip inside that. You then need something that's got some steam in it, something like a kettle or a saucepan, but you are going to keep your fingers very well away from the steam. But if you hold your tassel over the steam that's coming out, you will find that all these threads drop down really straight, and that's when you can just take care of any of these extra loose little ones like this yellow one here for me, and nip them off. If that's the only one, then I will just simply cut that one by eye, but if you've got lots, that's the way to do it. But of course, extreme caution when using steam. Again, safety first, so make sure that you're doing it with your hands well away from the source, so you're holding this on something like a long knitting needle. So I will get this one made up into a necklace, and then I'll bring you back when I've done that, and as usual have some other colour options to show you. If you want to make smaller tassels, then just use whatever you have that's a nice size available. For doing something like earrings, a ruler's a really good thing to do. And for this, because obviously we don't have anywhere to fit the cotton thread after we've done it, I will put the cotton thread on first. I've taped our cotton thread into place, and then you can make your tassel by going round and round up here, and obviously then just pull that through and tie it in the middle when you're done. And then you just have to get a small pair of scissors and then just cut through the back of your thread when it's all wrapped round, the same way you would do for the large one. So there's the 2 earrings ready to go to the next stage. I've bound them with cotton. As you can see, they're quite uneven, the amount of cotton I've got on both of them. I'm not worried about that because I will even that up when I put the scrap clay round. But just be aware of how they look. Make sure they're even at the next stage and work on them in tandem as you go along to make sure that you do the same to each one as you go. So there we go, here's our finished tassel pendant. So all nicely shone. I've made it nice and smooth, and then I've just added a very simple beaded chain with glass beads and added some findings on the end to turn it into a pendant. My 2 little earrings there, they've all been sanded and polished as well, and I've just added some of the earring findings on the end to make a pair of earrings. As always, I have some different colour options for you. So here's one I have made a little larger. And on this one, the colours I used lilac white into the raspberry, and then we've used emerald green in the middle, and then the outline was done in plum. I've used one of the variegated colours in the silks, and then a deeper red and a purple colour for the base here. And then this one is again the right sort of size to make into a pendant. And on this one I've used the Pacific blue, white into the peppermint, and then I've used raspberry in the middle there. And this one I've just used 3 different colours of blue in the tassel. So there we go, a fun little tutorial on how to make tassels and cover them with polymer clay. I hope you enjoyed that. That was just one sample of how to cover tassels. Obviously all the canes you've got at home, all of those can be used. I just had to make a cane to cover the tassel for the tutorial today. It's quite an easy one to do, and I hope you have great fun making loads of tassels, whether jewellery, soft furnishings or whatever you want them to be. As always, thank you so much for watching, and for those of you who subscribe, thank you so much. I really do appreciate that as well. I think that's it for now, so hopefully see you next time. Bye for now. Bye.